Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 5 of SP162 Mysticism, Finding Your Personal Path. And this week, you'll be working with a volunteer client on reflection. So let's start, as we usually do, with what that means. What is reflection? Again, we'll start with what it is not, and this is very important. When we talk about reflection in a session, we're not talking about your client's reflection. We're not talking about asking your client to reflect on what they've learned in the session or what they think about themselves. That's a different kind of reflection. For this week, remember, these tools are for you, not the client. So reflection is actually building on an element of active listening, which you remember from last week. Part of active listening is reflecting what you heard your client say. That's what we're talking about. So that's what you'll be practicing this week. So when we reflect, there are a few things to keep in mind. Obviously, you're actively listening, and you're picking up on cues about what your client is going through, what their experiences are, and so reflecting those back to them in a summation is one way for them to take a pause and hear what they've just said as reflected by what you've received. So, for example, our favorite client who has trouble with their job and they hate their boss and and the boss didn't even remember my birthday, but they remembered everybody else's birthday and it really upset me. And your reflection might be something like, I can see you're really frustrated because your boss doesn't seem to be paying attention to you in the way you'd like. For example, they forgot your birthday. And you're stating it, right? It's not a question. Is that right? It's because that's a yes or no closed, right? You're just reflecting what you've heard. You're not necessarily always using exactly their words, which is called parroting. But sometimes it does help, especially if a word is particularly poignant or important to them. Poignant meaning like it has a lot of emotion to it that they're grappling with. So if you might, for example, if they say, I'm pretty sure my boss hates me. Well, that's pretty strong. So you might reflect that right back to them. So you feel like your boss hates you. So that's what we're doing in the session. So I'm going to show you a video that covers a lot of how reflection works, and we'll come back and take a look at that and have a few words about that when we come back.
Hello everyone, my name's Dr. Jim Cook.
And I'm Dr. Laura Harwood. Welcome to the Skilled Counselor.
Paraphrase, reflection of feeling, and summarization are all staples of counseling. What are they? When do we use them? And what are some examples? Let's talk about them. Paraphrase, reflection of feeling, and summarization are often the very first counseling skills that students learn. While these skills are the foundation of working with people, they're often confused by students. The purpose of this video is to clear up any confusion by defining and providing examples of each of these skills. It's important to note that depending on which author you read, skills such as paraphrase and reflection of feeling are sometimes labeled differently. But we believe that it's easier to discern the two by simply labeling them paraphrase and reflection of feeling.
So you might ask yourself, what is the purpose of a paraphrase? The paraphrase lets the client know that the counselor understands what they are experiencing. It creates a connection with the client and increases the chance that the client will feel the empathy that you have for them. When a counselor in training begins to practice paraphrasing, they might use a sentence stem like, it sounds like you're saying, or I hear you saying. Then a key descriptor is added. For example, a client says, and you respond, it sounds like you're saying you'd really like to return to college, but right now your finances won't let you do that. Another example of a paraphrase is when a client, who's again in college, just stated, And you respond, "It seems like you're homesick and you think you might be losing out on what's going on at home."
Okay, so what is a reflection of feeling? Reflections of feeling are statements that are used when the counselor says what the client is feeling in his or her own words. This skill is used throughout a session whenever important feelings are stated by the client or perceived by the counselor. So why do we reflect feelings? Reflection of feelings helps our clients feel understood. They show that the counselor can recognize what the client is feeling about a given situation, experience, or even a person. This skill is a way that we show empathy, and using it results in developing rapport with your client. Another reason we reflect feelings is because sometimes clients don't know how they feel. By using this skill, the counselor helps the client to discriminate from a range of feelings. Thus, clients often gain a better understanding of themselves. Okay, so what are some examples of reflection of feeling? The first might be, and the counselor would say, "It sounds as though you're excited about the prospect of a new job, yet you're worried about moving out of state." Notice in that statement, the words excited and worried are used to describe how the client is feeling. Okay, here's another one. The counselor might say, "It seems as though you feel exasperated because there are many things to do and you don't know when you'll find the time to do them." In this example, notice that the word exasperated is used to capture how the client might be feeling. So before we move away from talking about paraphrase and reflection of feeling, there are 4 key points that we'd like to say about them. The first is that these skills are meant to convey that the counselor understands the client. Therefore, they should always be said as statements and not as questions. Questions convey misunderstanding and that additional information is needed. The second point is that we need to use different words than our client. If the words match too closely, then this is called parroting. Parroting does very little to convey empathy and also could be annoying to your client. The third point that we'd like to make about these skills is that they should be concise. Long paraphrase and reflections of feeling can be confusing and difficult to follow. If they cover more than 2 sentences, then these skills may be too long. The fourth point about these skills is that they are contextual. This means that they need to directly relate to what the client has previously said. We like to say that when paraphrase and reflection of feeling are used, they should come through you, not from you. This means that when they are coming through you, it's as if you're holding up a mirror and the client is able to see his or her own reflection. If it comes from you, the client doesn't get the advantage of seeing that mirror and instead is seeing your interpretation of what the client is experiencing. Summarizations are when the counselor takes all the themes that the client has just said and puts them into one kind of longer utterance. They are an efficient way to condense themes or important points that have been discussed in the session. They are helpful in a few different circumstances. The first is at the beginning of a session when a counselor wants to bring together important themes or points from a previous session. They're also helpful during the middle of the session when there's been a lot of information covered. This helps to focus the session by helping the client to think about what's been discussed so far and what may be helpful to discuss going forward. And then another point in which we might use summarizations is at the end of a session when the counselor concisely pulls together highlights or critical moments from the session. During the middle of a session, the counselor might say, "So far, I'm hearing 3 important points that we've discussed today. The first is that you are proud of the work that you've put in relative to developing a relationship with your father. You're finding that there's significant improvements since last year. The second is that these improvements have come at a cost because your siblings are upset that you've made efforts to repair your relationship with your father. And third is that you've recently come to the conclusion that you'd like to find a way to bring your family together to clear up any hurt feelings.
In this video, we discuss the basic counseling skills of paraphrase, reflection of feeling, and summarization. We also provided examples to help you distinguish the skills.
What basic counseling skills seem confusing to you? Leave us a comment below. Also, be sure to like and subscribe and watch for more counseling skills videos.
Okay, so I hope that helped clarify a little bit about what reflection is. It's important for me to point out that these videos that I'm showing you, a lot of them are for therapists and counselors, but as you can see, a lot of the tools are similar. So I just want to make that clear. All right, so let's talk about what this is going to look like for your assignment. Again, as always, use whatever modalities you use. Make sure in your summary that you're talking about how you used reflection. What did you reflect that you heard your client say? How did they react to your reflection? Did it elicit any further response from them? How did you work with that? And for the questions at the end, what went well using reflection? What could you improve on using reflection? And then, of course, you can answer any question or ask any questions you have for me, which I'm happy to answer there. And those can be about anything at all. They could be about how to run a session like this using reflection. They could be about any of the previous tools we've had, or it could just be about running a session at all. Okay, so that's really it. What I'm going to do is I will include the link to this video so you can have it on your own. And then actually I'll include a few other links that are really helpful for you to learn a little bit more about reflection. So again, to recap, reflection is not what your client is doing, but what you are doing as you hear them, as you actively listen. And you're going to want to make sure that in your assignment discussion questions that you're answering all of them with regard to how you used the tool for this week. Okay, if you have any questions, of course, feel free to reach out to me via Canvas email or pop them into the discussion board and we can talk about them as a group there. Good luck.